"Stop looking at me like that," he said, his voice low, almost dangerous, as if my stare had a power I didn't deserve. Or I might not be able to control myself. I froze, my fingers tightening around the cleaning rag. His gaze, it wasn't just intense. It was predatory, magnetic, and it made my pulse hammer in a way that was both terrifying and thrilling. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden hitch that made the polished floor beneath me feel like it could swallow me whole. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My voice betrayed me before I could even think. My throat was dry, my hands trembling. Every instinct screamed that I should move, that I should step back, retreat into invisibility. But every nerve in my body was screaming for him. I was just here to clean his mansion. That was it. That's all I'd ever meant to do. Scrub floors, dust chandeliers, polished silver, remain invisible, like a shadow flitting along the edges of his perfect life. The kind of life I could never touch. The kind of life that wasn't meant for someone like me. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Or maybe, it wasn't the universe. Maybe it was him. Maybe he had been waiting for me to notice him, just as I had been noticing him for months in secret. He leaned closer, and I could smell his cologne, warm and earthy, tinged with something darker I couldn't name, a hint of danger that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "You're thinking about what I'm thinking," he whispered. His voice was low, deliberate, velvet over steel, and it sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't deny it. I was. My mind raced, heart hammering. Did I look like that? Did my longing betray me in the slightest quiver of my lips or the twitch of my fingers? My eyes flicked to the polished marble floor, then up at him, then back at the chandelier that sparkled like liquid stars. And the world felt unsteady. I should have pulled back. I should have told him no, walked away, ignored the tension curling around us like smoke that smelled faintly of fire and something forbidden. But I didn't. My lips parted slightly, and suddenly, the mansion, the moonlight streaming through the tall windows, the polished floors, they all disappeared. There was just him. A single bead of sweat traced a line down my temple, and I felt like the entire room had shrunk around us. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere far away, the soft creak of the old floorboards beneath my shoes, but it all faded under the thundering pulse of my heart. I tried to steady my breathing, but it came out in short, shallow gasps, betraying every thought I was too terrified to admit even to myself. "Don't look so afraid," he murmured, a playful undertone laced in his otherwise dangerous calm. "I won't bite, unless you want me to." I nearly dropped the rag. My fingers clenched it tighter, knuckles white. His words were a challenge, a spark thrown into the tinder of my nerves. And even as my rational mind screamed, "Run, get out, he's untouchable," my body betrayed me. I wanted it. I wanted him. More than I had ever wanted anything. Every cleaning session before this had been a rehearsal in invisibility. I had moved silently through his rooms, polished surfaces without attracting his attention, swept dust into corners without his gaze ever finding me. But tonight was different. Tonight, he had found me. And it was terrifying. It was addictive. I wanted to pull back, to step away and regain control. But my legs refused to obey. My chest ached with a mix of fear and desire. My eyes traced the lines of his face, the sharp jawline, the faint shadow of stubble that made him look effortlessly dangerous, the way his lips curved ever so slightly at the corners, teasing me, testing me. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, my voice barely audible, even to me. It trembled like a fragile glass in a storm. I tried to keep my tone steady, but the quiver in my words gave me away. "I should be," he countered softly, his gaze never leaving mine. "And you shouldn't be fighting it." I blinked. His words hit me like a physical force. Fighting it? I wasn't fighting it. I was drowning in it. Every glance, every unspoken thought, every inch of space between us was charged with a tension that made my stomach twist and my knees threaten to buckle. A sudden sound, a vase tipping over in a distant room, made me startle, and I felt his hand brush against mine. Not a deliberate touch, not a flirtation, but a fleeting, almost accidental contact that sent sparks shooting through me. I flinched, and yet, I didn't move away. I couldn't. I was rooted in place, trapped by a desire I couldn't name and a fear I couldn't escape. "Why do you stay so quiet?" he asked, tilting his head, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. "I can feel your heartbeat from here." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. How could he feel that? My pulse thudded in my ears like a drum. I don't know, I admitted, my voice trembling, unsteady. The confession sounded pathetic even to my own ears. But he didn't laugh. He didn't mock me. He only leaned a fraction closer, his presence pressing in like a physical weight. "You think you should be afraid," he said softly, almost tenderly. "But maybe, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." I wanted to tell him that I was just the girl who cleaned his mansion, that I had no place in his life, no claim to the fire sparking between us. But the words died on my tongue. How could I explain the way my chest was on fire, the way my hands tingled, the way my whole body seemed to hum at the thought of being near him? A sudden thought struck me, dangerous and thrilling. What if he wanted me? Not just in passing, not just as a fleeting attraction, but truly, recklessly, completely. My pulse raced at the thought, my breaths coming faster. My hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with anticipation. He moved again, a subtle shift that brought his shoulder brushing mine. It was enough. Enough to make my mind reel. Enough to make my thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm. My rational self screamed at me to step back, to maintain control, to keep the walls of safety I had built around my heart intact. But desire didn't care about walls. I could hear the faint tick of the antique clock on the wall, the distant hum of the city, the whisper of the wind against the tall windows, and it all felt amplified, distorted, like the world had been narrowed down to just him and me. Every sense was heightened, every nerve alert. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixing with the faint warmth of the room, the weight of his gaze burning into me. I wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but my voice betrayed me. A soft gasp escaped my lips when his fingers brushed mine again, intentional this time, tracing a line that sent shivers down my spine. My knees felt weak. My chest felt too tight. My mind, it was spinning, a hurricane of fear, excitement, and longing. "You're trembling," he said, almost in awe, almost like it fascinated him. "Do you always react like this?" I wanted to deny it. I wanted to play it cool, to pretend that I wasn't on the edge of something dangerous, something forbidden, something consuming. But the truth was undeniable. "Maybe," I whispered, almost lost in the words. "Maybe I do." He leaned closer still, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. My hands gripped the rag tighter, knuckles white. The world outside, the chandeliers, the polished floors, the moonlight spilling in, was gone. There was only him. Only this impossible, addictive moment suspended between desire and restraint. A sudden creak in the hallway made us both pause, our eyes darting toward the shadowed corridor. My pulse jumped, but the fear was mixed with something darker, more thrilling. The danger wasn't just the possibility of being caught. The danger was him. The danger was wanting him this much. "You shouldn't want me," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "But I can tell you do." I swallowed hard. "I shouldn't," I admitted, my voice barely audible. But I didn't look away. How could I? Every part of me was drawn to him, a magnet to fire, a moth to flame. And then he smiled. A small, dangerous smile that made my chest constrict and my knees threatened to give out. "Good," he whispered. "Because I don't want you to stop." Time seemed to stretch and warp around us. I felt like I could lose myself entirely in this mansion, in this moment, in him. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of light across the polished floor was charged with tension. My fingers itched to touch him, to close the gap, to feel him against me. And yet, a part of me trembled, aware of the line we weren't supposed to cross, aware of the consequences if desire became action. But the line didn't matter. Not here. Not now. Not when every nerve, every thought, every shiver in my body screamed for him. I should have walked away. I should have told myself that this was madness, that I was just a girl cleaning his mansion, a ghost in his perfect world. But I couldn't. My feet refused to move. My chest refused to stop aching. My mind refused to ignore the fire he had ignited in me. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating: I didn't want to leave. Not ever. I had never wanted anyone this much. And I had no idea how dangerous that could be. Even now, thinking about it makes my chest tighten. It wasn't just desire. It was a slow, creeping fire that started in my stomach and settled deep in my bones. Every time I caught a glimpse of him, his silhouette framed by the city lights, the shadow of his jawline and the glow of the chandelier, I felt a flutter of panic, a thrill that made me dizzy and alive at the same time. He had this way of existing that was impossible to ignore. And I couldn't. No matter how much I tried. I had been cleaning his mansion for months. Months of moving silently through corridors that smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive leather. Months of scrubbing floors, dusting ornate chandeliers, polishing silver that gleamed so bright it almost hurt your eyes. Months of blending into the background, making myself as invisible as air, as forgettable as a shadow at dusk. Outside his walls, my life was ordinary, predictable. I worked 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, my days filled with monotony, my nights with exhaustion, and my heart with the quiet hum of loneliness. I hid behind the mundane routine that kept me safe, that kept me invisible, that kept me small. But the moment I crossed his threshold, everything changed. Every detail of his world pulled me in like a current I couldn't resist. The marble floors reflected the chandelier lights like tiny galaxies beneath my feet. The fireplace crackled in the evenings, warm and mesmerizing, filling the room with the kind of comfort I thought I'd never experience. The faint hum of his city view penthouse at night, with the streets stretching out endlessly below, made the world feel both huge and claustrophobic at the same time, like I was suspended somewhere I didn't belong. And him. Always him. He didn't just exist in the mansion. He owned it in the way he moved, in the way his presence filled every space without effort, without trying. He was tall, impossibly perfect, in that effortless way only danger and wealth can buy. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that could see right through me, past my defenses, past my walls, into the secret corners of my mind I had never admitted to anyone, not even myself. And I hated how much he unsettled me. I hated how my chest ached when he looked at me, as though he could see every desire I had tried to hide. I hated how much I craved the sound of his voice, low and deliberate, like it could reach inside me and rearrange my thoughts with a single word. I hated how much I wanted to feel the brush of his fingers against my hand, even if it was fleeting, almost accidental, almost teasing, and yet it left me trembling for hours afterward. I hated how the weight of his stare made me feel exposed, like every secret I had ever tried to bury was suddenly glowing under a spotlight, undeniable and fragile and entirely too visible. I remember the first time it really hit me, really stuck. I had been polishing the silver in the dining room, humming softly to keep my nerves in check, when I noticed him standing just at the edge of my peripheral vision. I froze mid-polish, the cloth trembling in my hands, and my heart slammed against my ribs as though trying to escape. He wasn't moving toward me. He wasn't doing anything overt. But just being there, silent, watching, made the air in the room feel electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. "Careful," he said softly, almost too soft, and the sound of his voice made my knees weak. I swallowed hard, gripping the rag so tightly I feared I might tear it. "You'll break it." I'm fine," I whispered, barely audible, though my hands betrayed me by shaking visibly. He smiled, and it wasn't a normal smile. It wasn't polite, or friendly, or the kind you might give to a stranger. It was knowing. It was deliberate. It was dangerous. And it made my stomach flip, made my pulse spike, made every rational thought I had scatter like leaves in the wind. For weeks, I lived like that, haunted by the pull of him, addicted to his presence, terrified by the fact that he could unsettle me with just a look, a whisper, a shift in the air around him. Every day, I tried to convince myself that I was just being ridiculous. That he was untouchable. That I was invisible. That nothing would ever happen. But every stolen glance, every accidental brush of his hand, every moment he lingered near me without a word made me doubt myself. Made me want more. Made me ache. And yet, he didn't pursue me. Not really. He didn't touch me in ways that would make this obvious, didn't say things that would make it dangerous, or so it seemed. But the tension between us was a live wire, humming constantly, making my pulse race and my chest ache even when we weren't speaking. Every time he entered a room, my stomach twisted. Every time he spoke, my knees threatened to give out. And every time our hands brushed, brief, accidental, fleeting, it was like a spark igniting under my skin. One night, I was dusting the bookshelves in the library, and I felt him behind me before I even saw him. I could sense it, his presence was too deliberate, too intense. My fingers froze on the spine of a book, my heart hammering so loud I thought he might hear it. "You always linger on the same shelf," he murmured, voice low and deliberate. "Even when you think no one's watching." I spun slightly, panic rising in my chest, and he was there, standing closer than I expected, closer than I should have allowed. His dark eyes bore into mine, reading me, dissecting me, unearthing every secret I had tried to hide. I started, but the words caught in my throat. "You think I don't notice?" he said softly, stepping even closer. The warmth of his body was almost overwhelming, and my breath caught. "You think you're invisible to me?" I shook my head, my pulse racing, my fingers trembling. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. He smiled again, slow, deliberate, like he was savoring the effect he had on me. "Yes, you do," he said, and my knees weakened just slightly. I gripped the dusting cloth for dear life, as though it could anchor me to reality. But it didn't. Nothing could. Not when he looked at me like that. Days passed in a haze of fear and longing. I would catch myself staring at him, pretending to clean, pretending to be absorbed in my work, all while my mind spun with impossible scenarios. What if he leaned closer? What if he touched me? What if he wanted me? The thought was intoxicating. The thought was dangerous. The thought made my chest ache in a way I couldn't name. I hated how much I wanted him. I hated the way my body betrayed me with every glance, every fleeting moment of proximity. I hated the way my thoughts revolved entirely around him, how he invaded my dreams, how his presence lingered in my skin long after he had left the room. I hated how he made me feel powerless and alive at the same time. And yet, I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Not if I tried. One evening, I found him leaning against the railing of the penthouse balcony, the city lights shimmering behind him like stars scattered across glass. The wind tousled his dark hair, and he was breathtaking, untouchable, dangerous, perfect. I froze in the doorway, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to tear my eyes away. He looked at me, and that look made everything else fade. "You're staring," he said softly, but there was no reprimand in his tone. Just an observation, quiet, dangerous, intimate. I started, but my voice failed me. My lips trembled, my pulse racing. "You think you can hide from me," he said, stepping closer, so close that I could feel the heat of his body, "but you can't." I wanted to back away, to retreat into the safety of my routine, my invisible existence. But I couldn't. My legs refused. My chest refused. My mind refused. I was drawn to him, like gravity to a star, unable to resist the pull, no matter how dangerous it felt. Every glance, every heartbeat, every whispered thought between us was a silent dare. A secret. A fire that could burn us both if we weren't careful. I wanted to touch him, to close the distance, to feel him against me, but fear held me back. And yet, that fear only made it worse. The tension was unbearable, delicious, agonizing. Our first real interaction wasn't supposed to be intimate. Not like this. Not with my pulse hammering against my ribs, not with the electric weight of him so close that I felt like I was floating and drowning at the same time. It wasn't supposed to involve stolen glances that made me flush until I could barely think straight, or heart-stopping moments where his presence was too much for me to bear. But somehow, it did. Somehow, the universe, or him, decided that ordinary rules didn't apply anymore. It started that evening when he needed an escape. A dinner at some upscale restaurant, somewhere polished and private, but still bustling enough to hide from prying eyes. The kind of place where the city's elite could walk past without noticing, and yet every corner of the restaurant hummed with tension. He had a confrontation to avoid, a messy, unavoidable confrontation that could ruin everything he had built. And somehow, I was pulled into it. Pulled so far that I didn't even think to question why. I remember the moment vividly. The city lights reflected off the polished marble streets as we arrived. The valet took his car, and the cool evening air brushed against my skin, making every hair on my arm stand on end. I could feel the heat from his body next to me, subtle, grounding, and completely intoxicating. My heart was already thrumming in anticipation, though I didn't yet know why. Then it happened. On impulse, without warning, he grabbed my hand. Not forcefully. Not aggressively. Just enough that it startled me, and yet sent an undeniable jolt straight through my chest. His hand was warm, firm, and impossibly certain, as though it belonged there as much as he belonged in the world. "Pretend you're with me," he whispered, the words soft but deliberate, like a secret meant for only me to hear. I froze. My heartbeat rattled inside my chest like a trapped bird. Pretend? Him? Me? And yet, before I could think twice, before my rational mind could protest, I found myself nodding. I played along. The ride to the restaurant was electric in its silence. Every street lamp reflected off his polished car, every turn made my stomach twist. I could feel him watching me through the corner of my eye, that dangerous, unreadable gaze that made me question everything I knew about myself. And yet, I couldn't look directly at him. Not yet. My own desire, my own fear, made my face burn in ways I couldn't control. I kept my hands folded tightly in my lap, my fingers twitching against each other. I wondered what it was about him that had this effect, why my body betrayed me so easily, why my heart raced uncontrollably, why every nerve ending in my body seemed alive with electricity whenever he moved even slightly closer. He didn't speak much, which only made it worse. Silence with him wasn't empty, it was charged, heavy with unspoken thoughts and tension that made my chest ache. I wanted to ask questions, wanted to break the quiet, wanted to pretend I wasn't trembling slightly under the warmth of his presence. But the words stuck, useless and fragile, in my throat. When we entered the restaurant, I felt exposed in a way I hadn't expected. The chandeliers glimmered above, casting warm light across the polished floors. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved swiftly around us, and the low murmur of conversation seemed to fade behind the storm of thoughts in my mind. He guided me to a table near the back, his hand still brushing mine ever so slightly, reminding me that this wasn't a normal evening, and that I wasn't supposed to be ordinary tonight. "Just act natural," he murmured, leaning just close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath, the faint scent of his cologne brushing against my cheek. His words were simple, but they sent my pulse racing. Natural? How could I act natural when my whole body was screaming with awareness of him, when every instinct in me wanted to lean closer, to feel the weight of his presence fully, to let this dangerous, thrilling connection consume me entirely? I nodded again, forcing myself to mimic composure. My fingers brushed against his as we settled into our chairs, a fleeting contact that made a spark fire through me. My heartbeat accelerated, and I was acutely aware of how impossibly close he was, how real this fake scenario felt, how much it felt like the first drop into something that could drown me. The first course arrived, and I tried to focus on the food, to anchor myself in some normalcy. But every glance at him stole my attention. The way he moved, so precise, so effortless, so entirely his own, made me want to memorize every detail. The way his fingers traced the edge of the wineglass, the slight tilt of his jaw as he examined the menu, the almost imperceptible shift in his posture that hinted at tension beneath the calm exterior. I caught myself staring once too often. His eyes found mine, and in that moment, I felt my knees weaken. He didn't scold me. He didn't comment. He simply gave me a look that said, "I see you. I know what you feel." And my chest tightened in response. Conversation at the table was minimal. He answered questions with short, precise responses, never allowing anyone to see the storm beneath his composed surface. But when he glanced at me, when his eyes lingered even briefly, I felt exposed, as though he could read every fleeting thought I had, every desire I had tried to bury, every tremor in my body that betrayed me. At one point, a man at a nearby table approached, looking for a brief introduction or perhaps recognition, and my pulse jumped. He tensed, a subtle shift in his shoulders that told me don't interfere. Then, in a motion that was instinctive, possessive, protective, he leaned closer, brushing his hand over mine. "Pretend," he whispered, almost playful, almost warning. And I nodded, forcing a smile that felt too fragile, too fleeting, too inadequate to cover the truth. The night stretched on, and the tension only grew. Every glance we shared was a stolen moment. Every accidental touch was electric. Every silent pause carried meaning. My heart raced, my hands trembled, and yet, I clung to the pretense of composure like a lifeline. I noticed the way he studied me, not as someone beneath him, not as someone insignificant, but as someone fragile, someone real, someone entirely alive in a way that drew him in. And I hated myself for it. Hated how much I wanted to feel that attention, hated how much I wanted him to lean closer, to touch, to want. By the end of dinner, the confrontation he had feared had passed, diffused without drama. But the storm between us had only intensified. He guided me back to the car with a hand that lingered just slightly longer than necessary, a reminder that this pretend scenario had opened a door that neither of us could ignore. The drive home was quiet, but heavy with unspoken tension. My fingers twitched against each other in my lap. My mind raced with thoughts I wasn't supposed to have. Why him? Why me? Why now? My heartbeat was loud, relentless, and I could feel the pull of him beside me like gravity. "You did well," he murmured as we pulled into the driveway of my small apartment, his voice soft but low, intimate. "Better than I expected." I wanted to say something, anything, but my words caught in my throat. I only nodded, my pulse still rattling, my chest tight. His gaze lingered on me, and for a moment, I could have sworn the world had shrunk down to just the two of us, suspended in a dangerous, intoxicating silence. As he stepped out, he brushed his fingers against mine again, fleeting, teasing, and I shivered. I watched him walk away, impossibly perfect, untouchable, and yet somehow tethered to me by the smallest threads of connection he had allowed. I closed the door behind me, heart hammering, hands trembling. I should have felt relief. I should have felt safe. But I didn't. I felt electric. Alive. Burned with a desire I couldn't name, with a tension I couldn't ignore, with a pull I knew was only going to grow stronger. And even as I leaned against the door, trying to steady my shaking hands, I realized something terrifying, something exhilarating. Nothing between us would ever be simple. Not now, not ever. And then the spark hit. I remember it vividly, like lightning tearing through a sky already heavy with storm. It wasn't gradual. It didn't simmer slowly. It struck all at once, blinding and exhilarating. One moment, I was just existing in his presence, quietly taking in every detail, every shadow, every flicker of movement. The next, I was completely undone. My chest ached, my hands trembled slightly, and the air around him felt like it had thickened, charged with energy I couldn't escape. It was in the smallest details, the brush of his hand against mine when passing papers in the office, the almost imperceptible tilt of his head as he caught my gaze, the quiet way his eyes seemed to linger just a fraction too long on my lips. At first, I thought it was imagined, a trick of my mind playing cruel games. But the pull was undeniable. The chemistry wasn't fake. It was real. It clawed at me, gnawed at my restraint, and made every breath I took feel too loud, too intimate, too revealing. Every ride home after that spark was torture disguised as comfort. Each evening, I felt the magnetic pull before I even reached the car. The driver, him, sat quietly behind the wheel, calm, polite, but somehow completely present. The small kindnesses, the way he asked about my day, the subtle attention in his voice, the polite pauses he allowed so I could speak without feeling rushed, began to mean more than I was ready to admit. At first, I told myself it was convenience. I needed the ride. It was late, the city streets were dangerous, and the thought of walking home alone made my skin crawl. But slowly, imperceptibly, that convenience became something else. Something I craved. Something I wanted. And then, before I even realized it, I was requesting his ride every single evening, just to see him. Just to feel the quiet hum of presence that seemed to wrap around me like a protective cocoon. It started with small things. A smile here, a laugh there. The way he shifted in the seat, subtle, deliberate, and yet somehow intimate. The low rumble of his voice when he commented on the rain against the windshield, or on the soft hum of traffic. It became my anchor. My pulse would calm at the sound of it, even as my heart threatened to explode with anticipation. And then, something deeper began to bloom between us. Something unspoken, intangible, but undeniable. I noticed the subtle ways he adjusted his posture when I looked too long at him. The almost imperceptible quickening of his gaze when I laughed nervously at a joke I didn't mean to tell. The faint warmth of his hand brushing against mine when passing a small object, or when shifting the seatbelt. Every motion was layered with tension, every silence heavy with possibility. "Why do you always ask for me?" he asked one night. Rain pattered relentlessly against the car windows, creating a rhythm that matched the wild beat of my heart. The soft sound was soothing and threatening all at once. His voice, calm yet probing, sent a jolt through me that I couldn't control. I shrugged, pretending indifference, though my pulse betrayed me. "I don't know, maybe I like the company," I murmured, trying to sound casual, light. My fingers itched to brush against his, to touch something, anything, that confirmed the truth between us, but I stopped myself, biting my lip instead. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that reverberated in my chest and made my knees weak. It wasn't just a laugh. It was a vibration, a warning, a promise, all layered together in the way he sounded when amused by me. "Maybe it's not just company you're after," he said softly, eyes glinting in the dim light, the reflection of passing street lamps dancing across his face like secret signals. I laughed nervously, the sound high and fragile, betraying my calm facade. My pulse jumped, and I could feel the warmth rising to my cheeks. He knew. Or at least, he suspected. And somehow, in the swirl of fear and thrill, I realized I didn't care. Not really. Not yet. The ride continued in silence after that, but the atmosphere was electric. I felt every small movement, every subtle shift of his weight, every inhale and exhale. The rain outside drummed a rhythm that matched my own heartbeat, a storm of sound and sensation that left me trembling slightly in my seat. My fingers curled around the edge of my coat, gripping it as if it could ground me, as if it could prevent me from falling entirely into the magnetic pull he exerted without effort. It wasn't just desire. It was awareness. Every glance, every movement, every sound was heightened, amplified. The faint brushing of his hand when adjusting the rearview mirror, the small sigh he let out when stretching slightly after a long day, the subtle shift of his gaze when he caught me staring, all of it was a silent dance, a conversation that didn't require words. And I was trapped in it, thrilled and terrified all at once. One evening, the rain fell harder than usual. The city lights blurred against the windshield, creating a kaleidoscope of reds and golds that mirrored the chaos in my mind. He didn't speak at first, and the silence was thick, full of the tension that had been building over weeks. I caught myself glancing at him through the corner of my eye, noticing the way his jaw tightened slightly, the way his dark hair clung damply to his forehead, the way his lips pressed together in thought. You think about me more than you let on, he said finally, the words breaking the silence like a bolt of lightning. His voice was low, deliberate, teasing, and it made every nerve in my body hum. I swallowed hard, trying to muster a response, to hide the truth behind a shrug, a laugh, a deflection. But my pulse was betraying me, hammering against my ribs, making me aware of every shiver that ran down my spine. Maybe, I murmured, forcing the words out through my teeth, trying to sound casual, trying to ignore the fire that flared inside me. He smirked slightly, though the smile didn't reach his eyes entirely. There was danger there, a subtle warning. A thrill. He leaned just slightly toward me, and I felt the warmth radiate across the small gap between us. The air between us seemed to thicken, heavy with unspoken possibility. Maybe, he said slowly, savoring the word, isn't good enough. His fingers brushed against mine, fleetingly, almost accidental, but it was enough to make me shiver, enough to make me want, enough to make me tremble in ways I couldn't control. I bit my lip, fighting the flush that rose to my cheeks, the tremor in my hands, the ache in my chest. The car seemed impossibly small, and yet the space between us felt enormous, charged with every secret thought, every unspoken desire, every pulse of electricity that passed silently between us. Days turned into weeks, and every ride reinforced the magnetic pull. I found myself requesting him without thinking, craving the quiet attention he gave, craving the subtle flirtations that left my pulse racing, craving the small intimacies that no one else saw. The rain became a background, a rhythm that matched my heart, a symphony to the tension between us. He noticed. He always noticed. Every time I tried to mask my excitement, he caught it. Every time I tried to act indifferent, he saw through it. And every time, the silent acknowledgement between us deepened the fire, pulling me further into a current I didn't want to escape. One night, the storm outside was wild, thunder cracking in the distance, rain drumming against the car roof like a frantic percussion. He glanced at me, his dark eyes reflecting the streetlights as he said softly, almost casually, "You don't have to pretend with me." I swallowed hard, my pulse jumping so violently I thought it might be audible. I don't know what you mean, I whispered, heart thudding painfully in my chest. He leaned just slightly toward me, the faint scent of cologne brushing against my skin, the warmth radiating in ways that made me ache. "You know exactly what I mean," he murmured. And just like that, I realized that the spark we'd ignited, electric, dangerous, thrilling, was no longer a secret between us. It was alive. It was real. And it was just beginning. It wasn't just the rides. No, the rides were only the beginning. What truly made my pulse race were the little moments, the moments that should have been mundane, ordinary, invisible, but somehow, in his presence, became charged, alive, intoxicating. Every movement, every small gesture, carried a weight I couldn't explain, a tension I couldn't ignore. It was as if the mansion itself pulsed with the electricity of our unspoken connection, as though the walls, the floors, even the chandeliers were watching, waiting, complicit in the dangerous gravity pulling us together. A touch here, a brush there, it was all enough. He handed me a glass of water one evening, the condensation cold against my warm fingers. His hand lingered just a second too long, grazing mine as though by accident, but the spark it ignited wasn't accidental. My pulse stuttered, a small thrill coursing through me, and I forced myself to look away, to focus on the simple act of lifting the glass. But it was impossible to ignore him. Impossible to ignore the way he watched, silent, studying, always just at the edge of my awareness. The way he lingered near the doorway while I worked became routine, but it was anything but ordinary. At first, I told myself I was imagining things, that he was merely polite, that he had a habit of standing and observing, that I was reading too much into shadows and silence. But every time I caught him there, subtle and watchful, my heartbeat would skip a beat. The soft echo of his presence against the polished floors made me aware of every tremor in my own body, every quickened breath, every twinge of longing I hadn't dared to name. Even the simplest exchanges were laden with a dangerous intimacy. The faint brush of his hand against mine as he handed over a folded pile of laundry. A look that lingered a second too long across the room. The tilt of his head when he noticed the small crease in my brow, as if he could read my thoughts before I even spoke. Every touch, every glance, was a spark. And I was burning. I hated it, in a way. Hated how completely he unmoored me. Hated how my rational mind screamed at me to pull away, to remain invisible, to protect myself from the fire I could feel consuming me from the inside. And yet, I couldn't. Not when his presence was everywhere, not when every glance made my heart lurch, not when even the smallest accidental contact left me trembling, reeling, desperate. There were mornings when he would pass me in the hallway, and the briefest touch of his hand against my arm would leave me breathless. Nights when he lingered near the fireplace while I dusted the shelves, the warmth of his body sending heat coursing through me in ways that made it impossible to focus. Even just his quiet, unobtrusive observation, it was intimate in a way I couldn't explain, a slow, delicious torture that left me aching for more, though I didn't know what more even meant. And the mansion itself became part of it. The echo of my footsteps in the marble halls felt heavier, more resonant, as if the walls themselves were aware of the tension that hummed between us. The chandeliers reflected the light in ways that made his shadow stretch across the floor toward me, even when he was standing still. The fireplace crackled at night, and the warmth seemed to reach for us, mirroring the invisible thread that pulled us together, no matter how much sense it made to stay apart. But it wasn't just desire. There was danger here, lurking beneath every heartbeat. He wasn't mine. He wasn't supposed to want me. I couldn't forget that. His life was complicated in ways I didn't fully understand. Haunted, shadowed by secrets I was never meant to uncover. Every stolen glance, every brush of fingers, every whispered word carried risk. And yet, despite knowing I was treading a line that could burn me alive, I couldn't stop myself. I remember the first time I truly felt the weight of that danger. It was late, the mansion silent except for the distant hum of the city outside. I was folding laundry in the guest room when he appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He simply stood there, framed by the soft glow of the lamp behind him. My chest tightened. My hands stilled mid-fold, and my breath caught. The air between us was thick, vibrating with a tension that was at once terrifying and thrilling. "You work too hard," he said softly, and the words were almost meaningless, but the tone, the way he said it, made my pulse stutter. He stepped closer, and I felt the heat radiate from him without touching me. My rational mind screamed at me to step back, to put distance between us, to remind myself that he was untouchable, dangerous, and not mine. But my body betrayed me. My legs refused to move. My breath hitched. And I realized, with a jolt, that I wanted him closer, wanted him here, wanted every dangerous spark he offered. Every moment became a test of restraint. Every glance was loaded with meaning. Even when we spoke of mundane things, laundry, cleaning schedules, inventory lists, it felt as if every word hung in the air, charged with a subtle electricity I could neither name nor ignore. I caught myself imagining what it would feel like to let the tension break, to let him lean closer, to let the sparks ignite into fire. And the thought both terrified and exhilarated me. I started noticing the smallest things. The way his fingers flexed when he was deep in thought. The subtle rise and fall of his chest as he watched me. The faint scent of cologne lingering in the corners of the room long after he had passed by. Every detail became amplified, every glance a silent conversation, every brush of skin an unspoken dare. And yet, with all the intoxication, there was fear. A constant, gnawing fear that this connection, this spark, this fire, was a mistake. That his secrets, his life, his dangerous allure would somehow consume me. I told myself over and over, he's not yours. He's not meant for you. Stay away. Don't touch the fire. And yet, the pull was like gravity. Unstoppable, inevitable, undeniable. The mansion itself became a cocoon and a trap at the same time. The polished floors reflected our shadows, elongated, distorted, as if exaggerating the intimacy between us. The chandeliers glimmered in a way that made every glance, every movement, feel cinematic. Even the silence, the quiet, heavy silence of the hallways late at night, was charged, loaded with potential energy, a tension waiting to snap. I remember one evening in particular. I was dusting the grand staircase when he appeared at the top, leaning lightly against the railing. He didn't move immediately. He just watched. The faint light cast shadows across his face, making him seem almost untouchable, almost mythical. My hands trembled slightly on the dusting cloth. My heart raced. And the thought hit me, this wasn't just desire. It was obsession, a pull I could neither deny nor resist. "Why are you so careful?" he asked suddenly, voice low and teasing, echoing slightly in the vast hall. "You treat everything like it could break." I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh that sounded too brittle even to my own ears. "Some things, they just need care," I murmured, though my eyes didn't leave his. I didn't dare. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, the faintest brush of his hand against the railing making my skin tingle. "Some things," he said, voice softer now, almost intimate, "are worth a little risk." And just like that, I realized I was burning. Not just with desire, but with fear, with longing, with a dangerous need I couldn't control. Every touch, every glance, every whispered word had built a tension that was now impossible to ignore. And even as the rational part of me screamed to step back, to protect myself, to remember that he wasn't mine and that his life was complicated and dangerous, the pull was irresistible. Like fate. Like gravity. Like something I had no choice but to surrender to. The tension escalated that night in a way I hadn't dared to anticipate. It was late, the mansion quiet except for the soft hum of the city beyond the massive windows. Every sound felt amplified, the click of my heels on the polished floor, the faint hiss of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant murmur of traffic far below. My hands trembled around the tray of drinks I carried, the condensation from the glasses slick against my palms. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out everything else, as if the world had narrowed into a single, impossibly intense point, him. He was leaning against the bar, tall, dark, impossibly composed, and yet utterly magnetic. His gaze found me the moment I stepped into the room, and suddenly, the mansion, my refuge, the place I had walked past 100 times, felt impossibly small. The city lights spilled across the marble floor, glittering like shards of something fragile, like a reflection of the dangerous pull I couldn't escape. The warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the shiver racing down my spine, a shiver that had nothing to do with temperature. It was desire. It was fear. It was something entirely uncontrollable. I tried to steady myself, forced a deep breath, and whispered, "You shouldn't be here." My voice shook despite my effort to sound firm, a brittle line trying to mask the storm raging beneath my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to turn, to flee, to return to safety. But the moment his eyes lingered on mine, all thoughts of escape evaporated. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, and the heat of his body brushed against mine in a way that set every nerve alight. I could feel the faint rise and fall of his chest, the scent of him, warm, earthy, impossible to define, wrapping around me like a cloak I didn't want to shed. "I wanted you here," he murmured, each word deliberate, intimate, sent straight to the core of me. His hand brushed mine, not enough to be forward, but enough to make my blood race, enough to ignite a fire that had been smoldering for months. My fingers tingled, and my breath hitched. I tried to force distance, to pull back, to remind myself that he wasn't mine, that this was dangerous, that the line we were crossing was not one I should ever have approached. But it was too late. I had already crossed it. My rational mind was screaming, yet every part of me was rooted in place, drawn forward by a force I couldn't resist. I placed the tray down on the marble counter with a soft clink, my hands still trembling. Every time he moved, the shadows shifted, the light reflected off the glassware, and the room seemed to constrict around us. The mansion, normally a space of control and order, became a maze of temptation, the walls closing in, the air thick with something forbidden, dangerous, and undeniably electric. "Why do you always look so careful?" he asked, voice low, teasing, yet threaded with something deeper, something I couldn't name. His eyes didn't leave mine, and I could feel the pull of him like gravity, irresistible and consuming. I started, faltering, my words dissolving under the weight of his stare. My pulse was racing so fast I thought it would betray me entirely. I don't know, I murmured, the lie unnecessary, the truth too dangerous to speak. He stepped closer, closer than necessary, yet not enough to be alarming. Just enough to make every part of me ache. The heat radiating from him brushed against my arm, my shoulder, and I swallowed hard, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted to escape. I knew, in that instant, that nothing would ever feel the same. Every glance, every breath, every stolen touch had led to this moment. The city lights stretched across the floor, reflecting off the polished surfaces in fragmented patterns, each shard a mirror to the tension humming between us. The sound of our breathing seemed loud in the quiet room, each inhale, each exhale, magnified, carrying weight, carrying meaning. I tried to focus on the tray I had set down, to anchor myself in something mundane, but it was impossible. The air itself seemed to thrum, alive with the possibility of something I couldn't name but wanted desperately. "You're trembling," he observed softly, almost a whisper, but sharp enough to make me freeze. I wanted to tell him it wasn't fear, that it wasn't desire, that it wasn't anything he could understand, but of course, it was all of those things. And he knew it. He always seemed to know. His hand brushed mine again, the movement feather-light, teasing, enough to ignite a thrill that ran down my spine and left my knees weak. The warmth of his touch lingered, a phantom fire I could feel long after his fingers had moved away. My lips parted slightly, my throat dry, my thoughts scrambled between wanting and fearing, between fleeing and surrendering. I shouldn't be feeling this, I whispered, though it sounded more like a question than a declaration. My eyes flitted to his, searching, questioning, begging without words for him to tell me it was safe, though I knew it wasn't. He smiled then, small, enigmatic, dangerous in its subtlety. "Feeling what?" he asked softly, each syllable deliberate, teasing, enough to make my chest tighten. "It's not about should or shouldn't. It's about whether you can handle it." I swallowed hard, aware of the pounding of my heart, aware of the tremor in my fingers, aware of the electricity charging the air around us. My breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined what it would feel like to let go completely, to step across the line and surrender to this impossible pull. But I didn't. Not yet. I was still caught between fear and desire, still anchored by the knowledge of the danger that lurked beneath his perfect, dangerous exterior. The room seemed impossibly small now, every shadow elongated, every reflection in the glass and marble a reminder of what was at stake. The city stretched endlessly outside, lights glittering, oblivious to the storm building in this quiet room. And yet, inside, time slowed. Every heartbeat was loud, every breath sharp, every glance a dagger and a promise. "You're beautiful like this," he murmured, voice low, deliberate, and my knees threatened to buckle. I had no idea how he could say such things with such casual menace, how words could be both a caress and a warning. I tried to avert my eyes, to ground myself, to tell my mind to escape, but it refused. My body, my heart, my every nerve was tethered to him. I felt the warmth of his hand again, brushing across mine as he reached for a glass of water. The contact was fleeting, subtle, but enough to send a ripple through me that left me shivering, aware, desperate, and terrified. I realized, in that moment, that the line had been crossed long before the mansion had closed its doors to the outside world, long before he had whispered that he wanted me here. I had already stepped over it in my thoughts, in my desires, in the fire I could no longer contain. The sound of the rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows, echoing through the mansion, mirroring the storm inside me. The world beyond seemed distant, irrelevant, as though the city itself had paused, allowing this suspended, dangerous moment to stretch, to thrum with tension. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to focus on something concrete, the glasses, the tray, the polished counter, but it was impossible. Every part of me was tuned to him, to the electricity between us, to the subtle, intimate choreography of proximity and restraint, of touch and withheld desire. "You can't hide from this," he whispered, voice low, intimate, closer than it had any right to be. His fingers brushed mine again, teasing, testing, and I felt my pulse leap, my chest tighten, my stomach twist. I wanted to step back. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. Not when every glance, every breath, every faint touch was pulling me further into a fire I didn't want to escape. The tension was almost unbearable. My hands trembled, my lips parted slightly, my thoughts scattered between fear and longing. I realized, with a jolt that left me dizzy, that I had already crossed the line. There was no turning back. Every stolen glance, every featherlight touch, every charged silence had led to this point. I was trapped, not by walls, not by circumstance, but by him. By the impossible pull of desire, danger, and the unspoken, magnetic bond between us. And in that moment, the mansion, the city, the night, and every heartbeat between us became a suspended world, charged with a tension I could neither resist nor escape. I was burning, trembling, and alive in a way I hadn't known was possible. I had crossed the line. The moment had come. And there was no going back. Days passed in a blur of longing and restraint. Every conversation crackled with unspoken tension. Every accidental touch made my stomach twist. And then the twist came, unexpected, devastating. I found a photograph on his desk. Him, smiling, arms around someone else. Someone I didn't know, someone who had been a part of his life before me. My chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. He saw me staring, and for the first time, he didn't speak. I wanted to demand answers, to hate him, to run. But I couldn't. My body refused to move. My heart refused to stop chasing him. We danced around our feelings, careful, secretive. Jealousy, longing, and desire intertwined with guilt and fear. I hated how much I wanted him, and yet I couldn't stop. Every glance, every small gesture, pulled me deeper into a world I wasn't supposed to inhabit. And then came the night of confession. He caught me in the library, rain tapping against the windows, shadows flickering across the room. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, voice low, vulnerable, and dangerous all at once. I froze, my breath catching. "You shouldn't," I whispered, knowing it was a lie, knowing that I wanted him just as much. He stepped closer. "I don't care," he said. And in that instant, everything changed. The mansion, the city lights, the rain, they all disappeared. There was only us. Every day after that was a whirlwind of stolen moments, whispered conversations, and touches that made my chest ache. The fire between us burned hotter, fiercer, more consuming. And I realized, slowly, painfully, that I had become stronger, bolder, unafraid of desire, unafraid of the danger he represented. He wasn't perfect. He was complicated, haunted, and sometimes impossible. But he was mine. Or maybe, we were each other's. And then, the final revelation. A secret from his past threatened to tear us apart, to undo everything we had built. But we faced it together, hearts open, raw, and unguarded. In the end, I realized something profound. I had cleaned his mansion, yes. But in the process, I had cleaned my own heart of fear, of doubt, of the belief that I didn't deserve passion, love, or fire. He took my hand, our fingers intertwining, and I knew, without question, that I was exactly where I belonged. Not just in his mansion, not just in his life, but in his heart. And maybe, just maybe, in that dangerous, intoxicating, impossible love, I had found home.